Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm, again, Otis White from Civic Strategies. We're going to do things a little different today. This is going to be a different kind of panel discussion. Our aim really today is to have a conversation. If you can imagine having a conversation with this many people in a room, we're going to try our best to have a conversation. And the conversation is going to be about education. It's going to be about economics and local economies, and it's going to be about what city government officials can do about education when they have no direct responsibility for education. And actually, this is a continuation of a conversation that we began in January. GMA had its January Mayor's Day in Atlanta. We had a room with more than 100 mayors in it. They were from all over Georgia, and we were talking about education. And I was surprised then to find how eager people were in that room, local elected officials, how eager they were to be part of improving education at all levels in their communities. Their big question was, where do we get started? How do we have an impact on our local education system? And we're going to see if that's the case here, if there's still that level of interest in it. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to introduce our panel. They will all be familiar names to you. We'll talk a little bit up here. I'll ask them some questions, and we'll get the conversation started up here. But then we're going to turn to you. And if you look carefully, there are 3 microphones in the aisles here. So at a point, I'm going to tell you let's start the conversation. So we'll want you to come up to the microphone, and we'll put you into conversation with these folks. Now, keep in mind, the topic today is about you as an elected official and what you can do in your own community today to improve education in the local schools, at the local technical college, at the local state college or university, if you choose to take these things on. So let me begin with some introductions. First of all, on our panel is Hank Huckabee, Chancellor of the University System of Georgia, which puts him in charge of 31 public colleges and universities in Georgia, from Tech in Atlanta and UGA in Athens down to ABAC in Tifton. Now, Hank is a person with no fear of challenges. He has been a teacher and administrator in both public and private colleges. He has been the state budget director, the director of the State Department of Community Affairs, and a state representative, although I learned just this morning, his tenure in the state legislature was 4 months, which seems about right. Now, I'm betting, though, of all of those jobs, the budget director one is probably the one most useful for running the university system these days. Next in our panel is Mike Thurmond, who has worn a lot of hats in the last 30 years. When I met him, we have the right to, okay. When I first met Mike, he and I were both young. And he was the newly elected state representative from Athens. He was later called upon to lead the Georgia Department of Family and Children's Services as it's made its transition from welfare to work. And after that, he ran for and was elected the state labor commissioner, where he served for 3 terms. Then there was a campaign for the U.S. Senate, which we'll pass right over. But Mike is another man who is absolutely unafraid of challenges, and he is now the superintendent of education in DeKalb County, which you may have read in the newspaper has had some problems with its school board. My bet is if there is a man who can fix this problem, Mike Thurmond is the one. And finally, there is Dean Alford, who is a CEO and a former state representative. By the way, is anybody picking up the pattern here? State representative, state representative, state representative. Clearly, this is where power emanates in Georgia. Now, since he left the State House in the 1990s, Dean has touched almost all the educational bases in Georgia. He has served on the State Board of Education, the State Technical Colleges Board, and now the Board of Regents. He is very active in education in Rockdale County, where he lives, and he helped start a magnet school for students to study math, science, and technology. Dean Alford. And again, I'm Otis White from Civic Strategies. We help with a little strategic planning work. So let me begin by asking the entire panel this question. Let's just start with a basic question, because we don't want to leave the most obvious question unanswered. How important is education in how places, cities, and counties turn out socially and economically? Let me just throw it out. Who would like to take it on?
Well, I'll start. Good morning, and it's an honor to be here today, and it's truly an honor to be on the stage with my longtime friend Mike Thurmond, who I did serve in the House with, and our Chancellor. I would say to you that the Chancellor is the second best appointment the Governor has made. I say that because my wife was the best appointment he made, and I have to say that publicly, but I just want to say that we're very fortunate. I have the podium just to say we have Hank Huckabee as our Chancellor. I will say he will go down in Georgia history, I think, as the best Chancellor this state has ever had, and as a Regent, we're very fortunate to have him. I'm excited that city officials want to talk about education, because I'm convinced that education is the #1 issue for this next generation in our state. If it's not the most important issue, it is right up there, and here's the reason why. We cannot afford ignorance. Ignorance is the most expensive commodity there is today. Your budgets are being stressed because of ignorance as it relates to the cost of health care, housing, public assistance. You saw the facts. And so ignorance is an epidemic proportion, in my opinion, in the state. When we have the number of children dropping out and we see what happens, sometimes our answers are, well, gee, we'll just deal with the consequences. We'll build more prisons, and that's like building more cemeteries for a disease. Instead, it really is at an epidemic proportion. But the flip side of that is this: the empires of the future are empires of the mind. Those communities who choose to have an educated community will thrive. Those that don't, won't. It's that simple. And so there is a great tie. The reality, the unemployment rates associated with this recession really hit hard those that were undereducated. The numbers are there, the facts are there. And so I'm excited today to have a conversation about education, because I believe it is the key to your cities.
Good morning. First of all, thank you, Otis, and I want to thank Mayor Reed for the invitation, and I too am delighted to be with my longtime friend, Dean Alford. We've been friends so long that our daughters are now friends, who were classmates, and Hank Huckabee, of course, served in the Clark County delegation, and he's been a longtime friend, a great educator. More importantly, he understands money, and particularly in the public sector. You know, education is, as Dean said, I think the most important resource. And especially at a time in the history of Georgia, in the history of this country, where we are seeing major transformations economically, demographically. And we have to work together to improve the quality of education. One of the things that I did that I think I've been most proud of through GMA, I sit down with my municipal elected officials, mayors and city councils in DeKalb County, and had a very frank and honest discussion about the challenges and the opportunities in the DeKalb School District, but more importantly, how we can work together to transform ideas and dreams into realities. Finally, I'll say this, and we'll talk about it more. Sitting here, and good to be back with so many friends I've known and worked with over the years, but I am the living, breathing, I'm a testament to the power of public education. Those who are maybe sometimes critical, or those who may not or may be cynical about public education, and I've told you all, I'm the product of 3 generations of illiterate Georgia sharecroppers. And in one generation, literally through the power of public education in Georgia, I was able to rise with the support of my family and good teachers from literally cotton fields to the legislature to all the titles that you all know. So I have great faith. What we have to do is come together, to work together, to recognize that it's not about my child, my school, my neighborhood, but it's about all of our children.
Hank, so how important is education to how places turn out?
Well, first, Otis, let me thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. My connection to GMA goes back almost 40 years when I was the Second Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. So I've always had a great respect for this organization and also for the individuals and the job you do. Education is absolutely going to be the cornerstone of what our future is going to look like in the next decades ahead. One of the pieces of data you saw very quickly on the screen was about where the United States now ranks in terms of a prepared workforce compared to other countries. 20 or 30 years ago, we were ranked #1 in the world in terms of the education training of our workforce. Today, we have slipped to number 15. And there are a number of countries below us that are working hard and coming fast. So the education is going to be the absolute essential necessity that we be successful with if we're going to maintain a viable economy, not just in Georgia, but in the nation. And as a result of that challenge, the governor, the Board of Regents, the technical college system have adopted what we call a program called Complete College Georgia. And the primary goal there is to drastically increase the percentage of our young people who come out of high school and go on to some level of education beyond high school, either a one-year certificate, say through the technical college system, a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, whatever. Studies out of Georgetown University tell us that in the next 10 years, of the new jobs that come online, they will require 60% of the successful applicants will have to have some level of certified training beyond high school. Using that criteria today, we are at 42%. That means that over the next 10 years, the university system, the technical college system, and our private college colleagues, we have got to produce 250,000 more successful students than we're doing now. That's a Herculean task, but our future depends on it. And we can't do it without the support of everyone. And I think you as mayors and other elected officials in local communities do so much in helping to set the climate, establishing an attitude and a support system for the value of education. So it's at the center of everything I think that we've got to accomplish over the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, now, if ignorance is an epidemic, and if education is the cornerstone on which it's going to determine how we turn out, then what role can city officials play in helping education in their cities? Because after all, school boards are elected independently, and the state colleges have their own governing structure. So in general, what can a city official do?
Well, I think the first thing is that you are the leaders of your communities, and you setting the tone about how important education is in your community. When I had the chance to speak to a smaller group of GMA officials back in January, I made the statement, I still think it to be true, is that if you sat here this morning and know the record of your high school football team, but you do not know your high school graduation rate, then you're not as serious about education as you think you are. And the reason for why I say that is it is probably the #1 indicator in your communities. What is your literacy rate? What is your situation? You know your infrastructure, but knowing the infrastructure in your community. So I would say the #1 thing you should know is the vital statistics as it relates to your educated community. We have 1.3 million Georgians over the age of 18 that does not have a high school education or a GED. We have 1 million Georgians that has a high school education and has never started any college. And we have 1.2 million Georgians who started college and dropped out. That's 1/3 of our population that is undereducated. And in your communities, bringing that to focus, to me, is probably one of the most important things you can do, because then you can say, what are we going to do about that?
And it's the bullet pulpit, Dean, and speaking to it, what really helped me early on in DeKalb was that I had the opportunity to go to city council meetings. I went up to Brookhaven, and then I also visited, I know Terry Knoll is here. I worked with the city councilman in Dunwoody, as well as other municipalities in DeKalb. I mentioned we met with the local municipal association, and out of that, the city of Stone Mountain, now we're going to transfer just a gym that we own, a historic gym, to the city that they've been using over the years. So it's a matter of building the relationships, and you all are leaders. And so any question that comes up about the local school district, people don't necessarily go to the school board member, they come to who? You. And so number one, from the education side, we have to ensure that you all know about what's going on in the schools. But please, please, please do what we're doing in DeKalb. Invite the superintendent and board members just to come and do a report on update. And finally, you know, my hometown is Athens, and in February we had a high quiz just on African American history, and Nancy Denson, our mayor, and I know Mayor Denson is out there somewhere, she came, she participated. And one of the prizes was to present a book to one of the young people, and the question was, who is the mayor of Athens? And it was so great, this one little kid, not only did he get it right, but he got a chance to meet the mayor. And she presented him with the book, and Harry Sims also was there. So just building the informal relationships, and where there's an opportunity to share resources, do it.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think one of the things that we have to reverse, and I think it's been changing. I remember over the years, there were times when the attitude I've seen between local government and the school board has been somewhat antagonistic. That is a recipe for disaster going forward. You as mayors, local government officials, I know you have a tough job. The last thing, you do well to get up every day and be sure that the police department's working, the water and sewer and everything else is going. But the future of your community, the future of your region is going to depend upon what happens in that school system. And many school systems are different. I live permanently in that area. I live in Oconee County. We have an outstanding school system in Oconee County. Next door, Clark County doesn't get it quite as high marks, but the school system in Clark County is dealing with an entirely different population. So what they do in Clark County has to be different than what we do in Oconee County in order to be successful. And so great successes will occur in both kinds of systems. And so you as a local elected official can mirror what that community needs, what will work in that community, and your leadership will be important. And your work begins not in the first grade or kindergarten. Your work begins working in your community, particularly with those programs, many of them nonprofits, that help get those youngsters prepared to go to school and keep them in school. So whether you like it or not, your future is absolutely tied to your local school system, and so is the future of the university system of Georgia.
You know, let's talk a little bit about particulars. Mike, you've inherited some tough problems as the superintendent in DeKalb County. We've talked about getting to know the statistics, getting to know the situation of the school system, getting familiar with what are the issues facing it. And we talked about creating relationships with the local schools. But is there any other thing, what other advice or what other help could you use in DeKalb County that could come from a city official?
Avoid deficit-driven strategies. You all have been in city council meetings and community meetings where 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, you spend the entire time talking about what's wrong, where are the deficits, what's not working. When I looked at DeKalb, when I received a call, my point was, okay, what are the assets in DeKalb? Well, the major asset we have is 99,500 students. They're all assets. And so once you start there, you can begin to see opportunities to improve significantly the situation. It's something I think Hank said it. Go to the statistics. Most of us understand school based on our historical understanding of school when we were there. For instance, most of my view of public education until now was based on my experience in the Clark County School District when I graduated 42 years ago. But schools have changed tremendously since then. And in DeKalb, we talk a lot about premier DeKalb. Well, when I went around the county, that's another thing, you have to go out and talk to people. Many people were surprised to know that DeKalb now has a 71% free lunch population, that nearly 20% of our student body are students who speak English as a second language, and that the system that we may have known, not only does it not exist, it's not very effective in providing the education and the support needed to address the needs of students who are now enrolled in our system. So first of all, don't paint with broad brushes. And by the way, with DeKalb, 3, according to U.S. News and World Report, 3 of the highest performing high schools in the state of Georgia and among the best in the nation are in DeKalb County.
And Hank, to you, if school boards are kind of a mystery to city officials, then the State Board of Regents must be unfathomable. So if you had a local college or university in your community or near your community, and you really wanted to help it become even better, where would you get started if you were a city official?
Be nice to the Chancellor.
We're always nice to the Chancellor.
I think it goes back to spin-off of some of the things we've already been saying. Do get to know the leadership if you do have a local institution in your community. But even if you don't, there is a regent who's been appointed to represent not just that district, but overall. But there is a congressional district regent, and you need to get to know him or her. We have 31 institutions, but we actually have locations, physical locations, in 60 communities in this state. So we make a big effort to try to get, to the extent we can afford to, get education out to where the people are. And there's some things we're going to be putting in place over the next 18 months, so we'll do that even further. But we're not as mysterious as some people think we are. I mean, here's Dean Alford. He's one of them. There's no mystery about him. But one of the things we're trying to do, and you can challenge us in doing this, is we know, given what we have to accomplish in the next 10 to 12 years, that we've got to do a better job of communicating with you. We've got to do a better job of communicating with the citizens of this state on the great things that we can do and the great programs that we do have. And as we do that, if you feel that we're not meeting the needs or addressing the needs for post-secondary education in your community, you all let us know and require us to be responsive. But I know the members of the Board of Regents, and there are 19 of them, are very desirous that we do a better job of connecting with the people like yourselves in your communities. We can't always do everything that you think ought to be done and do it in the time frame that you would like, but we are really trying to do a better job in reaching out to where our citizens are so that they can get access to higher education.
Now, I have promised these three gentlemen that the fun is going to begin when you all start asking questions. So I want you to be thinking about your questions. And one thing I know about local elected officials is they are not shy. So we've got microphones here, and if you'll start moving toward the microphone to ask a question, I want to ask one more question up here. We don't want to overlook the technical colleges. Now, Dean, you've touched, like I said, all the bases in Georgia education, one of which was serving on the technical college board. So same question. You're a local official. You want to do something good for your local technical college. What can you do?
Well, again, as Hank said, I think it's important that you have a relationship with that local technical college president, but I think there's some very specific things you can do. The reality of it is that we have job openings today in our state, but we do not have people with those skills. And trying to match the skills that the technical college can provide with your community for there are jobs that are there. Give an example. In the metro Atlanta area, we have 1,400 openings in information technology and healthcare. They cannot fill those jobs because we don't have people coming forth taking those classes. There's over 2,000 welding jobs open in our state right now. And so it's a very important thing in your communities to those that are underemployed or unemployed, the ability to make them aware of those job openings and that ability to make that match, I think is a very important thing you can do in your communities with the local technical college. There is a local technical college campus or location within 30 miles of every citizen of this state. That's by design. And so having that real understanding of how your citizens and driving and communicating that that's a real opportunity, to me is a real specific thing you can do as local communities in helping your citizens. The reality of it is that, you know, not everyone knows we have a technical college system. Not everyone knows they can go there to get their GED. Making them aware of that, we cannot over publicize that kind of information.
Yeah, so I mean, Dean's sort of general advice here, if you're sort of picking up on what he's saying, is you have the ear of your community in a way that maybe it's harder from the state level to have the ear of your community. Right. And if you use that to talk in an informed way, not in the deficit-driven way, but in an, you know, what do we have here? What can you accomplish here? You can make a big difference just by using the pulpit that you have.
Absolutely, and particularly in smaller communities where everyone truly knows everyone, right. Don't lose a citizen. And what I mean by that is that I have traveled to 110 of the 180 school systems. And I can tell you the biggest difference between those that are succeeding and those that are not is the attitude about their students. And what I mean by that is this. You go into one school and you go, how's it going today? Well, there's an attitude, well, if nobody gets hurt today, it's a great day. Versus you go into a school where they say, excuse me, what do you mean Johnny hasn't been here in 3 days? Somebody get in the car and go find Johnny. Don't lose your citizens to ignorance. Please don't do that. Grab every one of them and capture them and guide them in that path.
All right, let's hear from you all. We'll start here, and then we'll sort of bounce around to the different microphones, but we'll start right here.
Otis, thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Robert
Mayor.
Rickert from Macon, and really I would like to direct this to Commissioner Thurmond to start the discussion. I have learned a lot about workforce development and its history as a federal Labor Department program. It's been through several iterations, JPTA, and maybe even prior to that, something else. But now it's Workforce Development and a Workforce Investment Act. And it even calls for the participation of a chief local elected official. And the composition of the boards are specified in federal law. And it provides, as I understand it, Mr. Commissioner, 4 different programs, 2 of which are directed towards kids, in-school youth and out-of-school youth, and a significant amount of federal dollars that are funneled through the state for those particular programs, in-school youth and out-of-school youth. Number one, what is the governor doing now when he takes that program out of the Department of Labor and puts it under the governor's Office of Workforce Development? Number two, what's the possibility of educating ourselves as to our role that we could play through that workforce development program?
Well, let me answer your latter question and basically avoid your former question.
I don't know how you didn't get elected to the Senate.
Since the governor get ready to make some decisions about my board. But no, the Workforce Investment Act, you know, we worked together on that over the years when I was at the Georgia Department of Labor. It's critical, particularly for out-of-school and in-school youth and summer employment. As chief elected officials, Macon is a little bit different, but you all have areas where those funds flow. Be involved in helping to make decisions about how those dollars are appropriated. The first paycheck I ever earned, I earned in a summer youth program with JTPA at the Northeast Georgia Area Development, Regional Development Commission. I was so impressed, because you know, I worked for my daddy, he didn't pay. And he said, "You eating, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right, that's your pay." But so that helps to shape attitudes. It helps young people develop delayed gratification, respect for authority. So please get involved in WIA. It is critical, and it's an especially important way to reach out-of-school youth, those who've dropped out. By the way, we talk a lot about dropout. A large percentage of our young people drop out not because they're not smart or not doing the work, they're just bored. And I want to say something about dean and technical education. One thing you can do is help parents and students understand that it's just as important and you're just as successful to enroll and graduate from a technical college, Atlanta Tech, any other tech, Athens Tech, as it is to graduate from Georgia Tech or the University of Georgia Folk Valley. It is just as significant. And by the way, as Labor Commissioner, I can tell you something. The average young person graduating with a diploma or certificate in welding or plumbing or heating is earning more money than one who graduates with a liberal arts degree. So, and I'm finna channel my Labor Commissioner part. White collar, blue collar, no collar. Not the color of the collar, but it's the green and the dollar that make all the difference. So that's what's important about this panel. Am I right, Dean?
Absolutely.
And you can help just with that articulation and advocacy.
Yeah, that's right.
Just with that one point to let young people know that there are multiple pathways to success.
Absolutely.
Let's go over to this side of the room, and then we'll go to that side of the room. And then I see we're well represented on hub cities today, so we'll get back to the middle. Yes.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity
Who
to
are you?
participate.
So your name and...
My name is Tom Hogan. I'm from DeKalb County. I'm from the city of Chamblee.
All right.
And the thing that's been on my mind lately, and I don't quite know how exactly to articulate my question, but online education is taking us by storm. MOOCs, massive online open courses, are becoming more and more abundant for all of those programming opportunities that really are not efficient for us to offer even in our city schools, let alone those schools that are out there in the rural areas. I think that a MOOC program or a significant online program, both not only at the high school, but also middle school and even in the elementary school level, would be amazing. Now, I thought possibly the reason why the system wasn't pursuing this sort of line was that maybe there was some underlying political pressure to protect the jobs of teachers and that sort of thing. But I don't believe that's the case. I believe there's so much room for online education to push out so much more curriculum than we currently offer that it's just mind-blowing. And I would love to know what your thought process is institutionally on how we can convert our schools to being community centers and get the education where it needs to be online where they're paying attention. Thank you.
All right. Well, so there really may be two parts to this. One part is the K through 12 element of it, and then there's a higher education element. Let's talk about K through 12. Mike, what do you think about online education?
It's the shape of the future, but I think Gwinnett proposed to offer, was it Gwinnett or Cobb?
Cobb.
It was Cobb. And it was not well received. And it's something Mr. Huckabee said, and I want him to comment on it. that education, the structure, this structure has been in place for, what did you tell me, 200 years? And there is a harsh resistance to transforming that structure from brick and mortar classrooms to more or less online instructions. I think you're right, but and trust me, I've been inside the belly of the beast now. It is very difficult to change these educational institutions, and Hank can talk about it even more.
And Hank, does this, there are a lot of communities here that do not have a college or university physically in their jurisdiction. Does online offer an opportunity to deliver higher education to those places?
Yes, it does, but there's several caveats. One, we're spending a lot of time in my office. In fact, we're about to hire a new person to focus solely on online MOOCs, et cetera. But we have to be careful.
MOOCs, by the way, stands for Massive Open Online Courses, right? Okay.
We have to be careful. It is not a silver bullet for everybody in every situation. Many of our students today do learn best perhaps using some form of online education, but that's not true for everyone. What we're committed to doing, and we already have a lot going on online and have had for years in the university system, we just haven't done a very good job of getting the word out. But what we're looking at, and we're working with 10 other university systems throughout the country, is how we best do it to be sure that we're delivering quality education, while at the same time working with our faculty at the institutional level who are already there. Now, some of them will be resistant. There's no question about that. But we have to find the right blend, the right way to offer online education, also at a price that makes sense. Quite frankly, right now we have an online program we've had for about 10 years, I think, Regent Alford. But to take a course online costs more money than it does to take one face-to-face in the classroom. Well, that shouldn't be. But we're very much dedicated. We know that online education is an important piece of what we do in the future. And you'll begin to hear in the next 8 to 24 months a lot more from us about what we're doing at the institutional level, what we're doing among our institutions to offer online education. It's going to be there in the future, but it is not a silver bullet that's going to solve everything all at once.
Dean, do you have something to add?
Let me add 2 quick things. If you're not familiar with Khan Academy, you should be. Khan Academy is perhaps
spelled Khan.
And
Khan.
it's the #1 tutoring. If you want to know about how to do algebra, differential equations, or anything, you can go on there, and there's a tutorial for every bit of that. And every child, when they get home from their school when you can't answer those questions, you can go to Khan Academy, and there's someone to help you. This is wide opening. What's going to happen? It's going to transform. I would tell you something we did last month, I guess it was, Chancellor, at the Board of Regents. We now allow Georgia Tech to offer the first computer science master's degree online. It's the exact same class if you went to Georgia Tech. If you went to Georgia Tech and got that master's degree, it would cost you $30,000. We will be offering that for $6,600. It's going to change. MOOCs will change the face of education, I'm afraid, faster than we're going to be able to keep up with it. But it is a changing tsunami that's coming at us, there's no doubt.
Over here, question. And your name and city.
I'm Rebecca Chase Williams. I'm on the City Council of the new city of Brookhaven.
All right.
And
you have a question for Mike Thurmond, I
well,
bet.
I visited Brookhaven, so
yes.
I'm ready, Ms. Williams. I'm ready.
We in DeKalb owe Michael Thurmond a debt of gratitude because he is going to lead us out of the wilderness. And we all know that if our schools even come close to losing their accreditation, we can have the most beautiful bike lanes and trails and paved roads, and nobody will want to move in or move a business to our city if our schools are not accredited. So this is such a vital issue to us, but I'm thrilled to have this panel today because we struggle with what can we do as local officials who really have no control over the DeKalb school system. There's certainly talk of creating city schools, independent schools, and I urge you to help us move that forward, but I think that's a long legislative battle. I want to ask you a question. that I think is a major driver behind the quality of our schools, and I never hear it discussed in these kind of forums, and that's the issue of apartments. Parents talk about it all the time. I think there's pretty good evidence that where you have a lot of children coming from apartments, you have a lot of transition. I hear it from teachers all the time. 40% of the children will not be there the next year that are coming from apartments. I was with another city councilman from another city last night who said, my kid's going to this great school, and it's so great because there's not a single apartment complex in that district. Well, guess what? In Brookhaven, we have 64 apartment complexes. And we have some premier high schools in Brookhaven, but we have one high school that goes to all apartments. And so as we go forward, apartments and zoning is something we as city officials have some control over. And so I just want to hear your thoughts on how we balance, or how we reach out, or how we bridge this gap. If we truly want to address the graduation rate, we've got to talk about either how we reach our families in apartments, shore them up, or not put them all in one school.
Let's go to Mike and see what he has to say about that.
Well, first, Council Lady Rebecca Chase Williams, thank you all, you and the mayor, for inviting me up. And it's important to go and talk to the people who often are your harshest critics, because I think that creates legitimacy, it opens up the line of communication. And when you say apartments, really, you're speaking to socioeconomic issues. And as it relates to zoning, and in some counties and cities, planners will not concentrate low-income housing in one area of the city, which is really not the apartments itself, because apartments in Buckhead are very expensive. But when you have compressed groups of low socioeconomic residents, that impacts attendance zones. So the real question is that when you're planning your cities or planning your counties, how integrated do you want your socioeconomic groups to be? Historically, we've done what? Compressed. So that's really the challenge. Now once you begin to articulate that, if you're building a subdivision with $300,000 and $400,000 homes, do you also want to put some more affordable housing in that area? It just depends on the politics and the vision of the people who are making the zoning decision. Now, what we are doing in DeKalb is that we recognize that all children can learn. That, and I told, matter of fact, we got 500 principals meeting right now, and assistant principals, that, God distributes the genius and the ambition and the talent equally. He doesn't sit over there and decide, well, these children over in this neighborhood are going to be ambitious and talented. That's not the way it operates. What happens after they arrive on this earth influences at the level and the level at which they will achieve. So we have to be willing to intervene, to assist, to support, and where you have high concentrations of low socioeconomic groups, that schools have to recognize that and intervene in a proactive way to help them be successful. So it's all about zoning, Council Lady.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mayor Copenhaver.
Deke Copenhaver, Augusta. First off, I have a comment and then a question.
Now, this is like Jeopardy. It has to be framed in the form of a question.
Okay, well, I do want to publicly thank the Chancellor and Dean for their support of Georgia Regents University in Augusta. It is greatly appreciated. And Chancellor, I also want to thank you for your willingness to partner with the city in helping to have the university grow. And you and I have had conversations about the potential for educational outreach to help address our 22% poverty rate in Augusta, Georgia. So for you gentlemen, I would like to ask, how do you see universities and technical colleges partnering with our local school systems to do that? We have 3 of the top 10 zip codes in the state for putting people in the president system, and I've shared with people that until you address the educational outcome, you're never going to break that cycle. When people, when they get out, they get $20 in a bus ticket, and they come right straight back to the same zip code. So how do you see that partnership working?
So the question is, can public schools and universities and technical colleges work much more closely together?
Absolutely.
And how could you do it? I mean, if you...
Well, let me thank the mayor for that question. I think I'm scheduled to talk with you by telephone tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I look forward to that.
So this is a substitute for this?
No,
Okay.
I'm always happy to talk with Deke. When I became chancellor, I sounded 3 themes that I hope would guide our work while I was chancellor. And one of those was partnerships. Partnerships with the technical college system was right at the top of the list, but also partnerships with folks like you at the local level. We have probably, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, the best relationship between the university system and the technical college system in Georgia that we've ever had. We work very hard to be sure that we can increase the number of courses that will transfer between the 2 systems. Having said that, Commissioner Jackson and I also work very hard with meeting and discussing issues with the state superintendent of schools. We have an entity in Georgia known as the Alliance for Education Heads, and we meet at least monthly. And we're continually working together to find out what we should do to encourage local school systems to do all they can to get youngsters prepared to come to our system, either one of our systems, once they finish high school. That's a real issue. So many kids now who are coming out of school, high school, even though they graduate, they're not prepared to do post-high school work at any level. And the technical college of today is not like the technical college of 30 or 40 years ago. Those students, if they're going to be successful in some of the most important programs that the technical college system has, they have got to have pretty significant level of mathematics and reasoning skills. So Commissioner Jackson and I work very closely all the time. And one of the things we're trying to do, and the governor has taken up the cause on this, that right now, to keep students from getting bored and to encourage them to stay in school and give them greater opportunities, we need to have a more simplified approach that allows high school students to enroll while they're in high school, either in a technical college or a university system school. And the governor has recently appointed a commission that's going to look at that. Right now, I think we have about 7 or 8 different approaches. It's very confusing, very complex, very inefficient. So this is something we take seriously. We work on this monthly. The dialogue and discussion between our system and the technical college system and the state superintendent of schools is better than it's ever been, and we're finally attacking some of these problems as true partners.
Ron?
Thank you all for being here and addressing this issue. I'm Ron Fennell from Smyrna. We're bordered on the south by the Chattahoochee, on the north by Dobbins, on the east by the Galleria complex area around Cobb Parkway. Our community is blessed in that we have recently the data from the census indicates 51% of our population has a college degree or better, 51%. But our public school system does not match that data point. We're putting our kids in school. We're spending now 7, 8 years with a lot of this new population infusing time, effort, and money into foundation support for the local school system, so it's increasing performance levels at those elementary schools. We're still lacking at the middle school level. My question is, since we don't have a real conversation between school boards and local governments, we really haven't had that kind of conversation. Even though Cobb County is perceived among the best in the state, it is a challenge for us as local government officials to address those questions on economic development when we're trying to do certain things. My question is about funding. The SPLOST model, as it's currently built, only deals with CapEx. What are we going to do to help focus our attention on solving some of the problems with, as Herman Talmadge used to remind us, no matter what the question is, the answer is almost always money. We have a question about how the money allocation in solving some of these problems are. Can we talk about SPLOST and how that affects and impacts us?
I'll take that one. When Governor Perdue was governor, he asked me to chair the Education Finance Task Force to look at some of those issues. And I would say to you, and I get on thin ice when I say that, there's enough money. Yes. The problem is the state straps on local school systems with so many regulations and so many requirements that the QBE formula rivals the IRS code in complexity. It really does. The laws have been changed, though, so that local schools now can get waived of all of those regulations if they're willing to be accountable. And so the thing that I would say to you is, in all your school systems, is when they feel that, one of the things they can do is either become a charter district or they can become what is known an IE square school system. And in both those, they basically can waive all of the requirements that are there, but they then become accountable for performance to the Department of Education. And so I think what we've really tried to do is that we just cannot continue to fund inefficiencies the way we have, and until we strip all that out. I'll give you a case in point. QBE says, I'm going to give you so much dollars per student for a librarian. So you get 1.2 librarians. Well, it's hard to hire 1.2 librarians, so you get this 0.2. What I really need is another English as a second language assistant, and gee, there's nothing in the formula, but I got this 0.2 and I cannot use those dollars, and if I do, I get an audit report. That's insane.
Agreed.
Fix that. And that is fixable today. The reality of it is we have to completely redo that structure, because you cannot afford to add money into that inefficient of a system.
We've got a few more minutes left in this session, so if we get quick questions and quick answers, we can probably work through a couple more. Let's go over here.
Thank you, and thank this panel for having us today.
And you are?
I'm Bill Collins from Rome, Georgia,
All right.
Commissioner. And my question to the panel, and one of you can take it, is, do you think it is important going forward that we install such classes, etiquette classes? GMA thought it'd be important enough some years back that us, even as commissioners and newly electeds, coming on to have those type classes. As an employer, there's so many young people come forward, doesn't have a clue about the eye-to-eye contact, the opportunity for the attire and things of this here nature, of sitting in front having dinner with a family that they invited. And I think about what Mr. Thurmond just said, Commissioner Thurmond said earlier about coming up, and a long time ago, and things are not the same anymore, but those type discipline type etiquettes was placed in us, embedded in us, and today.
Okay, now I think we got it. I think we got it.
I just want to know.
So the question is, should we be teaching more about social skills in the schools?
Yes, but let me tell you what really needs to occur. And to all of my friends, I'm an elected official, all of us, I offer you a word of caution. It's not what you think. And what I've understood is that, we can go, and I've done it, and you've done it at City Council, at the Capitol, to come up with great ideas. I encourage you to spend one day inside a school district. It is not as you perceive it to be. And the one challenge, the one mistake we made is that the political environment for the last 10 years, maybe 20 years, has shifted all the responsibility for educating our children primarily on teachers and principals. The persons with the greatest influence on a child's educational career is not the school board member, superintendent, chancellor, principal, it's the parent. It's the parent. And so what we are doing right now, look, I'm telling parents, we can educate your child, but it's hard for us to raise and educate your child, right? And so we need you to help us educate your child. And so that means that we have to build capacity of our parents to be greater supporters of their children. It's not that the parents don't love their children. Poor parents love their children just as much as upper income parents do. What we have to do is help them, and I'll stop. Teachers are not social workers. They're just not. They don't have the training. They don't have the expertise or the skill set. So if we're going to address the issues of poverty and unemployment, then it's not fair to say, okay, teacher, you go do it.
Hank, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, very quickly, in a broader sense, this is a real issue, not only kids coming out of high school, but college as well. Some people in Atlanta tell me that they're so frustrated that when they try to employ some of our graduates, they're lacking the soft skills. They don't recognize that, you know, when you're hired, you're expected to work 5 days a week, not just 4. That you dress properly when you go for an interview, that you know how to interview, that you know how to write a resume, that you know how to write a transmittal letter. And that's so discouraging. Why do we have to teach kids coming out of college how to do those things? The sad point is a lot of them don't have that. And I don't know the answer to it. Some are feeling that we ought to require students to take a course on social skills. Maybe someday we'll find a way to do that. Online education, I think, may be a way that we get that across. But it's a real issue. It is a real issue. And I know right now, when I do commencement speeches and I stand up there and shake the hands with all those graduates, I can tell you right by that experience which of those young people are ready to go to work. The ones that reach out their hand and give you and look you straight in the eye and shake your hand and say thank you, they're ready to go. Those who won't look up and give you the dead fish, those graduates are going to have trouble. I don't have the secret solution to it yet, but I know it is a real issue that the business community talks to me about every day.
I think I'm going to go home and check my son's handshake today. So.
Yeah, you should.
Be wise.
I talk with
Kenneth Turner, City of Gordon. Thank you for GMA for putting on this forum. But I think I would like to ask President Reed and maybe Lamar Norton if they'd be willing to share this video clip that we had at the beginning so that we can use it perhaps to incite our community to give us more support. But then
I think the answer is yes. I just got the thumbs up from Lamar.
Great, that's great. And then the question I have is, I suspect every person in this room know what the education needs are. What we're looking for are answers. And I want to suggest something at a little bit higher level, and I'm a layperson.
Quickly.
Every 4 to 8 years, we start a new major education reform at the state level. We need a more sustainable form of governance, education governance, statewide, to develop policies and implement those policies, irrespective of who the new governor is. I'd like for you to comment on that, if you will. Thank you.
All right. Y'all have a thought?
They gave me a mic that doesn't work either. So.
It's on.
Is it on? Okay, I cannot hear. The real challenge is exactly that. The governance issue with 180 school systems makes life very tough. I personally think, though, and we all served under the Gold Dome, part of the challenge is that it's real easy sometimes to sit in Atlanta, and y'all not going to recognize this, but those of us who sit under the Gold Dome think we know what's best for everybody. And we have the idea of the day club, and so we send all these things. The best results is when we get out of the way and let local communities and local systems solve their own problems. And I would say this to you. There are those of us in what we did with IE Squared and what we did with the charter districts who simply said, let the state get out of the way, hold them accountable, but let innovation occur at the local level because that school, that community knows what's best for that school, but that school should in fact be performing at a level that ensures those students will be successful. And I think that's the real coup. So the sustainable part of that is this, is that we all get serious about schools truly performing. And if we do that, what really gets people going is the stats when they come out that we've talked about and seen. Somebody has an idea and we think we can treat everybody the same. There's 335 high schools, real quick, like in this state. I would argue of the 335, Michael's exactly right, about 75 to 100 of them are as good as any schools in the country. The problem is we've got about another 75 or 100 that are disasters. And so what we have a tendency to want to do is to go fix the whole system, trying to fix those 75 or 100. That's the mindset we have to change so that we don't have the idea of the day club.
Let me ask a question for the panel here. Should local city officials get involved in school board races? I don't mean running for school board. I mean finding good candidates, supporting them, helping them. Would that be a benefit?
That and jumping in alligator pits. I mean, that's a tough thing to go do. But I would say this. I think we've seen where mayors have said, that's it. This local school system is not getting the jump. They provide the leadership. And I think in all seriousness, that is leadership that's politically tough to do, but it's courageous, but it's necessary.
Mike, what would you say?
Well, not so much elections, but look, get involved, period. At least have the superintendent or the chairman of the board come and make an annual report as to the progress and the opportunities and the challenges of the schools in your municipality or even the schools in your county. It's relationships. Y'all know that. It's all about relationships. And one of the advantages, and I don't have that many, is that I'm not hesitant about reaching out to relationships. And I'll say this, because we're at the end, we can have better schools. The only question is, how badly do we want it? Do we want it bad enough that black folk will go on the other side of the county or town to sit down and talk to white folk about how we're going to make the school better? That I want it, but do I want it bad enough to work with Democrats or work with Republicans? You know, we want all this stuff. But the real question is, how badly do we want it? How much are we willing to sacrifice? And how much are we willing to contribute to improving education for children who may not live in my neighborhood?
That's right. That's right.
We are out of time. I am so sorry because we were just getting started here. I've heard so much, you have the ear of your community. You can create relationships with your folks in your school system. It's important not to focus on the deficits, but also at the assets. And with that, can we have a round of applause for this incredible panel?
Always enjoy it.